Hello students, welcome to EasyElimu Learning Simplified. My name is Mr. Stanley Omboko. So dear students, welcome to another session of an artist of the floating world analysis. And remember in our previous video, we basically looked at, that is the introduction of an artist of the floating world by looking at some background information about the author, who is Kazuo Ishiguro. We were also able to look at the major characters and the minor characters that we have in the novel. We looked at again the relevance of the title. So if you missed that, kindly ensure that you get the previous video to ensure that we all are on the same page. So in this session, I'd like us to look at that is episode 1 summary. When I talk about episode 1, I'm talking about the first part, that is some of the events, the series of events that we have in October 1948. Remember, the book is having 4 episodes. That is the first episode being October 1948, the second being April 1949. Then we also have November 1949. Then lastly, there is that is June 1950. So talking about some of the series of events that we have in October 1948, or rather by looking at the entire summary that we have in this episode. So talking about that is October 1948, dear students, we are told that the narrator Masuji Ono describes his home and how he acquired it. So Ono is not, nor has he ever been rich, and he acquires his large and elegant house in an unusual way. Akira Sugimura, who is a respected and influential man in the city, built the house. So after his death, his family decides to sell his home to a buyer whom they feel will do the home justice. So Ono is approached by Sugimura's 2 middle-aged daughters, who present him with a low price for the house and tell him they will investigate his background to see if he is worthy of it. So the sisters add that their father was an art appreciator and knew Ono's work as an artist. So Ono's wife, Mishiko, is offended by the Sugimura's high-handedness, but Ono reminds her that they will be investigated in a similar way in the coming years when their children start the process of finding spouses. Part of the reason the family wants to buy the Sugimura house is bolster the family reputation and improve the children's marriage prospects. So Ono himself finds the idea of an auction prestige appealing. He thinks that more things should be awarded to people this way instead of to the highest bidder. Still, he feels that the Sugimuras are rather rude to him. When they encounter him, they often ask only about the state of the house instead of making polite inquiries about his family. So this irritates Ono. So years later, Ono reflects that after the surrender, the younger of the 2 Sugimura sisters came to visit the house. So Miss Sugimura hardly paid attention to Ono's news that Mishiko and their son Kenji had been killed. That is, they died during the war. Remember, Ono's wife died when the war was coming to a close. So she only seemed to care about the state of the house. So Ono was annoyed at this, but upon learning that she had lost most of her family during the war and was overcome by emotion, forgave her rudeness and showed her around. So the house was damaged during the war, especially the very beautiful corridor running alongside the garden to the eastern wing. So Miss Sugimura was near tears at the sight, but Ono reassured her that he would repair it. However, supplies remained scarce for a long time after the surrender, and Ono had to dedicate all available supplies to repairing damage to the main house. With only himself and his daughter Noriko living there, he felt less urgency to open the eastern wing. Uh, Today, Ono reports, the corridor is covered by sheets of tarpaulin and full of dust and cobwebs. So Ono has, however, repaired the damage to the veranda where his family had often spent time chatting before the war. So Ono recalls his married daughter Setsuko's visit the previous month. On the morning after Setsuko's arrival, Ono and his two daughters sit on the veranda, chatting as they used to before the war. So Noriko tells her sister that their father has become much gentler and less tyrannical, but needs a lot of looking after because he spends his days mopping around the house. So Ono contradicts Noriko, but does so with a laugh to communicate, that he knows the Jabs are in good humor. So his daughter Noriko adds that she won't come back to look after him after she marries. Setsuko appears to grow uneasy during her sister's remarks and shoots Ono an inquiring glance. So eager to change the subject, she calls her son uh, Ishiro, who is rowdily running back and forth on the veranda. So Setsuko calls to Ichiro to come sit down, but he ignores her. So Ono calls to Ichiro to come to sit with him so that they can discuss main things. Uh, Ichiro obeys and asks his grandfather whether the monster is prehistoric. So Ono has no idea what Ichiro is talking about, but Setsuko explains that Ichiro saw a movie poster with the monster on it that sparked his curiosity. So Ono tells Ichiro they would need to see the movie to find out if the monster is prehistoric, but that he isn't sure the movie will be appropriate for a young child like Ishiro. So Ishiro becomes insulted at this remark and shouts, "How dare you!" Noriko diverts Ishiro's attention, saying she will not be able to uh, that is lift the heavy table. So left alone with her father, Setsuko asks if Noriko's marriage is imminent. That is, if it is about to, happen or yeah. So Ono tells her it is not and recounts how Noriko has spoken indiscreetly in the same way about her marriage in front of strangers. So Setsuko falls into thought and Ono looks at her face. He thinks that she has forgotten that she has gotten better looking as she has gotten older, just as her mother predicted she would. So when Setsuko was young, Noriko had teased her and called her a boy just because of her physical appearance. But we are told that she got that is more beautiful uh, according to age. That is as she gotten older. So Setsuko says that she imagines it was a terrible blow for Noriko when, the year before, the Miyake family had cut off marriage talks at the last minute. So Setsuko asks her father if he ever heard anything about why the proposal fell through, explaining that her husband Suichi believes there must be some secret reason behind it. So coldly, Ono tells her he would have told her the reason if he knew it. So in the present, Ono explains that it may seem like he was shocked with Setsuko, but this was not the first time she had questioned him about the Miyake's withdrawal, and he was frustrated by the suspicion that he was keeping something from her. So again, Ono provides his own analysis of the Miyake's withdrawal from marriage talks, saying that the Miyakes likely pulled out at the last minute because they felt that their social status was inferior to the Ono family. So perhaps they waited until the last minute because they were confused about the right thing to do. So Jiro and Noriko claimed that it was a love match, but in the end they decided it wouldn't be right to marry above uh, their that is their standard. So digressing further, Ono says he gives little thought to status and is often surprised at how highly he is esteemed. For instance, on a recent evening, he was drinking in Mrs. Kawakami's place, that is a bar, which is at the Pleasure District, when Shintaro advised Mrs. Kawakami that Ono could help her relative get a job. So Ono realizes that Shintaro is remembering a time, that is in 1935 or 1936, when he had given Shintaro's younger brother, Yoshio, a recommendation. So the two brothers had come to his home to thank him, promising him their eternal gratitude. So Ono says this visit showed him how far his status had been elevated through all his hard work, something he never would have noticed otherwise because he is unconscious of status. So Ono tells Shintaro and Miss Kawakami that he now has fewer connections, but he wonders if perhaps he does in fact still have influence that he himself is unaware of. So Ono says that even if Shintaro seems naive, it is nice to spend time with someone who is not bitter. Like most people these days, uh, it is pleasant to visit Mrs. Kawakami's and find Shintaro at the same bar he has been visiting for the last 17 years. So Shintaro, who was once his pupil, still treats him with great respect and asks him questions about technique, even though he no longer works as a real artist. So Mrs. Kawakami often teases the gullible Shintaro, tricking him into thinking she is serious when she's kidding. So Shintaro also sometimes believes people are joking when they are serious. So, for instance, once Shintaro wondered aloud what had become of a general who had recently been executed as a war criminal. So, the customers in the bar disapproved of Shintaro's admiring attitude towards the general. But when Mrs. Kawakami told him the general's fate, Shintaro thought that she was joking around. So Miss Kawakami has been edged by the war and she has very little business at her bar. So the pleasure district where the bar is located used to be full of many bars and people strolling. That is people strolling, but now all the other businesses are gone. And again, she remembers in the old days, many artists and writers spent their time talking and drinking late into the night, that is in the pleasure district. So one of his favorite haunt or joint in the area was called Mijihidari. So he helped the bar become the most prominent one in the neighborhood and had been provided with his own table where his best students would sit and talk to him. So Ono recounts how he once told his students um, that is assembled at the Midihidari about the incident with Shintaro and his brother Yoshio. So Shintaro had not been one of the top students, but Ono's protege Kuroda had mocked Shintaro for his extreme gratitude at Ono's intercession to help his brother get a mere white-collar job. So Ono said he was surprised to see, that is based on his ability to get a job, how far his stature had grown. So Kuroda replied that Ono was extremely modest and had no idea how respected he was by the public and his students. So this kind of praise was common when his students became drunk, and Kuroda was often the one to give these speeches. So Ono says he usually ignored these outpourings, but found Kuroda's praise very gratifying on this occasion. In the present day, the atmosphere now in Mrs. Kawakami's place feels to Ono like it has never changed. But the rest of the pleasure district is unrecognizable because there are a lot of changes and there are new buildings being erected, roads being built, concrete roads, that is, etc. So right after the war, many of the buildings were still standing, and Ono hoped there would be repairs and activity would return to the district. Instead, we are told that bulldozers came and tore down the remaining buildings. So there has been nothing but trouble in the area surrounding Mrs. Kawakami's place for the last 3 years. Ono again recalls recently looking back at the pleasure district from the bridge of a station, which leads from uh, it to his house, leads from it to his house, seeing smoke rising from the rubble and feeling melancholy. So Ono returns to his account of Setsuko's visit of the month before. That is why, dear students, remember uh, in the previous video, we said that the novel has proven that Ono is indeed an unreliable narrator because he keeps on skipping this scene to the next scene, then again going back to the previous scene, and so on. So he returns to his account of Setsuko's visit, that is of the month before, leaving his daughters talking on the veranda. He goes to find Ishiro, who is impersonating a man on horseback, yelling, "He your silver," and other words Ono cannot understand. So Ono asks Ichiro if he is pretending to be a samurai or a ninja, but Ichiro replies that he is pretending to be a lone ranger. So Ono tries to explain to Ichiro why it would be more interesting to pretend to be a Japanese hero, but Ichiro ignores his grandfather, Ono. So Ono becomes frustrated, but then gives up on trying to explain to Ichiro and instead apologizes to him. So Ono picks up a sketchpad that he gave to Ichiro as a gift the night before. Then again, what happens is that Ichiro does not want his grandfather to see his sketches, but Ono holds the sketchpad out of Ichiro's reach. So he sees that Ichiro has made several unfinished sketches of trams. Another thing in the episode is that Ono offers to help Ichiro. That is on the scene. Is that Ono offers to help Ichiro make his drawings better, which interests Ichiro. So he asks his grandfather if he used to be a famous artist, and if it's true that he had to retire because Japan lost the war. So Ono tells Ichiro that everyone retires once they get old, like him, and want a rest. Ichiro says that he wants to see one of his grandfather's paintings, but Ono diverts his grandson's attention. He tells Ichiro to draw something he saw the day before. So Ichiro begins to draw the skyline of a city with a large reptile standing on top of a building and tiny people fleeing in fear on the streets below. So Ono says the drawing is good and asks Ichiro questions about it. So remember, these are what Ichiro is drawing is that is what he saw on a movie poster where there was some huge reptile, with some people fleeing because they are fearful and so on. So Ono tells Ichiro that as a reward for his good work on the drawing, he will take him to see the monster movie. So Ichiro says his grandfather may be scared, but Ono says that Ichiro's aunt and mother are more likely to be scared. That is because they are women. So this makes Ichiro to laugh uproariously at the statement. So Ono encourages Ichiro to continue with his drawing, but Ichiro excitedly scribbles on the drawing before running off to find Noriko, yelling, "Hio, silver!" So Ono sits for some minutes thinking about nothing in particular, as he often does. So another thing that we have is eventually Ono goes out to the veranda and finds Setsuko sitting there. So Noriko and Ichiro are in the garden below. Ono sits with Setsuko and tells her about Ichiro's game. So Setsuko, remember Setsuko is the older daughter. So she explains that Ichiro was playing cowboy and pretending to speak English. Ono reflects that Ichiro would never have been allowed to see a cowboy movie only a few years before. And Setsuko replies that her husband, Suishi, thinks that American heroes are a good influence on their son. So Ono tells Setsuko that he promised Ishiro to take him to the movies and hopes they can all go together the next day. So Setsuko says that this is kind of him, but she thinks Noriko may have other plans for the next day. So Ono says that he knows nothing of Noriko's plans, and he is sure Ishiro will have his heart set on seeing the movie. So that evening, after supper, Ono tells Noriko about his plan to take Ishiro to the monster movie. But again, Noriko says they already have plans to go to the deer park the next day. Ono encounters that the deer park can wait, but Noriko insists and says they can also plan to visit. That is, they also had planned to visit Mrs. Watanabe. So Setsuko thanks her father for his generosity towards Ichiro and suggests that they go to the cinema the following day. And Ono asks his grandson Ichiro if he wants to go to the deer park or to the movies, but Ichiro won't reply. So Ono persists in asking him what he wants, and Ichiro runs from the room. So another thing we are told in this scene is that Ono tells Noriko that she has upset Ichiro. Sorry, he tells the youngest daughter Noriko that she has upset Ichiro. So Noriko says that Ono is being ridiculous. So they already have plans, and besides, Ichiro won't enjoy such a scary movie. Another thing is that Ono goes looking for Ishiro, but when he finds him, Ishiro does not respond to Ono's words of consolation. Ono rejoins his daughters. Then Setsuko is the older, asks him gently if he will accompany them uh, the next day, but Ono replies that he has things he must do. So annoyed, Noriko says to her sister that their father has nothing to do but mop around the house. Her sister Setsuko says that she will stay at home the next day with her father to catch up. So Noriko says that Setsuko should not let Ono spoil her trip, but Setsuko says that it will be very pleasant for her to spend time with her father, and Ichiro will enjoy spending time alone with Noriko. So Ono is glad about this outcome because he looks forward to speaking to Setsuko in depth. So it does not occur to him that she has something in particular she wishes to discuss with him, that is with him. So the following day or the next day, Setsuko enters the reception room to find Ono standing there, lost in thought. So Ono explains that this would have been unusual for him before his retirement because he had made a practice of only entering the reception room on special occasions. So in his own father's home, he had not been allowed to enter the reception room until he was 12. So he believes that some of his talent for capturing a scene after only a brief glimpse of it comes from the days of his childhood when he would try to reconstruct what the reception room looked like, that is based on only a brief glance. So the narrative, dear students, jumps back to Ono's childhood. Again, you are now able to see how unreliable Ono is when it comes to narration. So when taking about when he takes us back to his childhood in Tsuruoka village, uh, we are told that he is 12 when his father begins to summon him to the reception room once a week to discuss business. So Ono's father shows him his ledgers and talks to him for a long time about his profession. Sono does not understand the things his father tells him, but is afraid to let on about his ignorance. So looking back on these business meetings, as the father used to call them, Ono is still unsure why his father put him through this experience. So perhaps it was to show him that he was expected to take over the family business, or perhaps it was to make a show of involving him so that Ono could not later complain that his father had mishandled the business without his knowledge. So the narrative skips ahead now to a moment in Ono's adolescence. So one night when Ono is 15, his father calls him into the reception room. So Ono is struck by the presence of a large ash pot, usually reserved for use by guests, which sits in front of his father. So his father had asked him to bring all his paintings to the room, but now he questions whether Ono really brought all the paintings that is everyone of them. So Ono admits that there may have been a few paintings he left out. And Ono's father says he imagines these are Ono's favorites of his paintings. So the father tells him that his mother is under the impression that Ono would like to become a painter. So Ono's father says that Ono's mother must have been mistaken about this, and when prompted to reply, Ono concurs that his mother must be mistaken. So Ono's father says he hears his wife in the hallway, but Ono hears nothing. So Ono's father commands Ono to ask the mother to step into the room and to fetch his remaining painting. So Ono goes out to the hallway, which is empty, as he expected it would be. When he returns to the room with his mother, he thinks he smells burning, although the ash pot looks untouched. So he feels something is burning. So his father tells him that when he was only a baby, the family was visited by a wandering priest who claimed to have insight into Ono's character. So Ono's mother says in a whisper that it is best not to take to heart what such men say. But Ono's father continues, recounting how this wandering priest told them that Ono would tend toward slothfulness and deceit. So Ono's mother counters that the priest also said many good things about Ono. So his father concedes this point, but says that he has also observed Ono's laziness and weak will as he has grown up. So the father picks up his paintings and again asks his son if his mother is wrong in her belief that he wants to be an artist. Ono remains silent. So his mother tells his father that he is young and will outgrow the idea of becoming an artist. Ignoring this, Ono's father tells Ono that artists live in a depraved, impoverished world. Then Ono's mother says that some artists surely rise above this fate, and Ono's father admits that some artists, do. But he says Ono is likely to be the exception to the rule. That is the exception to some of the artists who that is some of the artists who rise above the fate that the father talked about. So he says that his duty as a parent is to protect Ono from growing up into someone who will shame the family. And we also told that the father says he wants to speak to Ono's mother and tells Ono to leave. So later that night, that is the same day, we are told that Ono is walking through the darkened hallway when he runs into his mother. So he says that he smells burning again, but she says he must be imagining this. So he asks his mother what his father is doing, and she says he is working on something in the reception room. And Ono tells his mother that he does not care what his father is doing, and the only thing father succeeded in kindling is his ambition. So the mother expresses her approval, but Ono says she has misunderstood him. His ambition is not to be a businessman like his father, but to rise above the petty interests in money. So, in short, Ono wants to become an artist, just as the mother wanted. So Ono's mother tells him that when he is older, his priorities will change. Then Ono says, or he tells his mother that his business meetings with his father disgust him. So his mother says nothing, and Ono repeats that his father has kindled his ambition. So in the present, Ono says that he sees that is his father. He sees himself as having disgraced. So he returns the narrative to the second day of Setsuko's visit. Now, going to a different scene again, when she found him in the reception room. So Setsuko is arranging flowers in front of a Buddhist altar, speaking very indirectly. Setsuko says Ono may want to take certain precautionary steps to ensure Noriko's marriage negotiations progress as planned. So Ono says he doesn't know what she means. She says that she is concerned about the family's investigations into one another's pasts. And they also says that they will hire the same detective they hired last time to help them, that is in the marriage negotiations. So Setsuko replies that she is concerned about the other side's investigation of their family. And Ono says he doesn't think they have anything to hide. So Setsuko laughs nervously and apologizes for being so bad at expressing herself. She says Suichi would be much better at expressing her meaning and that they do not want any misunderstandings to arise about the past, since Noriko is almost 26 and they cannot afford another failed marriage negotiation. So she says that she is sure that her concern is unwarranted and that her father has already taken all the necessary steps to ensure Noriko's marriage goes through. So looking at her floral arrangement, she says that she has little skill at at arranging or doing decorations. So Ono says the flowers look splendid. Then the older daughter Setsuko laughs self-consciously. So the narrative shifts again, dear students. It shifts again to the present, and Ono describes how reflecting on that is the conversation he had with Setsuko. He feels irritated. So he realizes that his irritation is not directed at Setsuko so much as it is at Suichi, Setsuko's husband. So Ono knows how much Suichi suffered in Manchuria and tries to show tolerance when Suichi shows signs of bitterness towards members of Ono's generation. But Ono feels resentful all the same that Setsuko seems to share Suichi's perspective and that this perspective has spread to Noriko. So during Setsuko's visit, uh, he noticed that the two sisters would sometimes break off their conversation when he approached, meaning that they had some, hidden conversation or private conversation that they probably didn't want their father to hear about. So Ono recalls how a few days before, Noriko told him about running into Jiro Miyake. So she told Ono that she had asked Jiro if he was going to be married. So Ono was shocked at Noriko's indiscretion. She reported that Jiro had been embarrassed but had admitted that he was going to be married soon. So Noriko said she almost asked Jiro why he and his family pulled out of the marriage negotiations before the year. That is the year before, sorry. And Ono replied that it is good she did not ask, saying that the Miyakes had explained at the time that they felt Jiro was too inferior in status to marry Noriko. So Noriko said that that was just a formality, and she never learned the true reason that the courtship had ended. So when Noriko said that perhaps she wasn't pretty enough, Ono replied that it had nothing to do with her. Pointedly, Noriko said that she wonders why the Miyakes pulled out, if not for any reason having to do with her. So Ono says that this exchange with Noriko reminded him of the time he ran into Jiro outside of his workplace. So Jiro had looked shabby in his work clothes and had acted awkwardly as he and Ono walked to the tram and then waited for their respective trams. So a week later, the Miyakes had withdrawn from marriage talks. So Ono tries to analyze his encounter with Jiro for signs that it had something to do with the Miyake's decision to withdraw from the talks. So he wonders aloud to Setsuko, who is visiting again, if Jiro seemed awkward because he already knew that his family would be ending the marriage negotiations. So Setsuko asks if Jiro said anything that hinted at this, but Ono cannot remember Jiro saying something. So Ono says even a week after the conversation, he could hardly remember it. So he explained that he had been preoccupied with trying to put Jiro at ease and had not paid much attention to what was said. So Ono suggests to Setsuko that perhaps Jiro was self-conscious about his workplace in front of Ono, and this was why he ultimately decided his status was too low to marry Noriko. So Setsuko treats this theory skeptically. So she seems to have new theories instilled in her by Suichi for why Noriko's marriage fell through. Since her recent visit, Ono has been thinking of Ono has been thinking over his encounter with Jiro again, even though he could hardly remember it as little as a week after it occurred. So Ono recalls part of his conversation with Jiro that he had not previously seen as significant. So while waiting for their respective trams, Jiro told Ono that the president of his company had died. So after Ono expressed his condolences, Jiro explained that the president had killed himself as an apology for what the company did way back, that is before the war. So probably some of the things that their president did were linked to the war. So in their conversation, Ono argued that such a suicide is a shame and a waste of life, and that people shouldn't be blamed for supporting their country during a war. So Jiro said that there was relief in the company and a feeling that the president's suicide would allow the company to move on. He said many men who are responsible for the mistakes of the war were cowards compared to the president. He continued that some of the men who made the most consequential mistakes had failed to admit to their mistakes, and that this was the greatest cowardice of all. So, as Ono reflects on that conversation now, he wonders whether Jiro really said those words. So they sound much more to him like something Suichi would say, and indeed, he reflects since he considered Jiro to be his future son-in-law. At that time, he might have confused his words with something his actual son-in-law Suichi had said. So, as he reconsiders this, he becomes sure that it was Suichi who used the phrase "the greatest cowardice of all" on the evening after the ceremony for the burial of Kenji's ashes. So it is from here, dear students, that we learn that it is probable that Jiro Miyake called it a quit. That is when it comes to marriage negotiations because of Masuji Ono's past and about the war. So the narrative turns to the day of the ceremony for the burial of Ono's sons, that is Kenji's ashes. So the ashes do not arrive until a year after Kenji's death and are mixed together with the ashes of other soldiers who were killed charging across a minefield in Manchuria. So during the ceremony at the cemetery, Ono sees Suichi walk away looking angry. After the ceremony, Setsuko explains to Ono that Suichi has been to many similar ceremonies and they make him angry. So Ono is puzzled about why the ceremonies would do so. So later, with the guests gathered in the reception room, Ono approaches Suichi, who is standing alone, to ask him why the ceremony made him angry. So Suichi says that he is angry at the waste of life. One counters that Kenji died bravely. That is Ono's son Kenji died bravely. So Suichi stares at him in silence, which unnerves Ono. Then Suichi says that half of his high school class died a similarly courageous death for a stupid cause. He says the people responsible for all those deaths are still alive now, enjoying great success and getting along with the American occupiers. So looking back, Ono thinks that it was at this moment that Suichi used the phrase saying that those who have not admitted responsibility show the greatest cowardice of all. So Ono thinks that it was because he was drained by the ceremony that he did not try to challenge Suichi. So instead, he talks to him about his work and Ichiro. So he only came to realize later that Suichi's mood that evening was typical of him, and that he no longer behaved as he had when he married Setsuko 2 years before the war. So Ono agrees with Suichi that too many members of his generation died in the war, and understands that his experiences in Manchuria were terrible. So still he finds it worrying that he feels such bitterness and even maliciousness towards members of the older generation. So Ono sees something of the same bitterness in the fact that the Hirayama boy has recently recently been beaten up for singing old military songs and chanting slogans. So the Hirayama boy is actually a 50-year-old man. He's a 50-year-old man with developmental disabilities. So he used to wander the old pleasure district during its heyday, singing patriotic songs and receiving food or money as a reward. So the Hirayama boy doesn't understand that these songs are no longer popular in the post-war period and still sings them. So Ono thinks that the current climate of bitterness in the country lead people to beat the Hirayama boy. Reflecting on this, he thinks that perhaps Jiro really did make the comment about the greatest cowardice of all. Perhaps he thinks Jiro was and is just as embittered as everyone else in his generation. So he turns his narrative now to the trip he took, the day before on the tram to the Arakawa district. So with its residential atmosphere, Arakawa hardly felt like part of the city and was only connected to the city in 1931 when the current tram lines were laid down. So digressing again, Ono explains that the introduction of these tram lines stretching all the way to Arakawa gave those living in the crowded city center a way to get some space and fresh air. So the expansion of the tram also led to the blossoming of the area he calls our old leisure district. So Ono had been coming to the bars in the Furukawa area for 20 years before the expansion of the tram lines brought many more people to the neighborhood. So in 1933 and 1934, when the authorities were in the progress of shutting down decadent establishments, Ono wrote to them advocating for the transformation of a bar owned by an old veteran named Yamagata into a patriotic bar where artists and writers who supported the government could gather. So the authorities responded to Ono's idea enthusiastically, and Yamagata renovated and expanded his bar. So soon after opening the bar, which he called the Migi Hidari, Yamagata told Ono to pick a table to be reserved for his sole use. So Ono explains that in 1933 he had been coming to Yamagata's place for 20 years already. That is starting in 1913 when he arrived in the city. So in 1913, the Furukawa district was ugly, full of abandoned warehouses and shabby homes. So Ono lived in an attic room where he hardly had enough space to stand up as he painted at night, causing him to splash the walls and tatami. So still, Ono was so thrilled to be making a living as an artist that she didn't mind the squalor. During the days, he worked with 15 others in a long room above a restaurant. So Master Takida, the owner of the art firm, Ono was accepted by pressed his employees to quickly produce large numbers of paintings on a deadline. So often they worked on 2 or 3 hours of sleep. Then again, a year later, not a year later, but a year after, Ono started working for Master Takida. An artist named Yasunari Nakahara joined the firm. So Nakahara never gained any reputation, but went on to teach at a high school. We are told that it is a position he still holds today because the authorities did not see any reason to replace him. So Ono remembers Yasunari by his nickname, the Tortoise. So he still has a self-portrait the Tortoise painted. So the painting honestly depicts the tortoise's timidity and earnestness, but also gives an inflated sense of his intellect. So Ono says that he has never had a colleague who could paint an absolutely honest self-portrait, since it is impossible to see oneself as others do. So the tortoise got his name because he painted very slowly. Um, and in the rushed climate of Takeda farm, the other workers became frustrated with the tortoise's slow productivity. So the tortoise and Masuji Ono became very close friends because he used, that is Ono stepped in and defended the tortoise. That is every time he was being, that is mistreated by the other artists, saying that he had more artistic integrity than the others because he did not rush in his work. So Ono and that is Ono and the tortoise later join, that is the painter and the printer. They later become pupils of the painter known as Seiji Moriana. That is they live Takeda farm. So a lot happens after that, and the narrative shifts back to the present now. That is about three years since the last meeting with Masuda. So Masuda is helped into the reception room by the woman who answered the door when Ono, called. So he's very ill and weak. He expresses his surprise to see Ono, saying they didn't part on the easiest terms. So Ono says he didn't think they had quarreled. So Matsuda says, of course, they had not quarreled, but it has been 3 years since they last saw one another. And Ono says he has been meaning to come to visit for some time. So Masuda apologizes for having missed Michiko's funeral and begins to reminisce about when Michiko and Ono first came together. So Ono says that Masuda facilitated their match since his uncle was too awkward to do it, and that Michiko was always grateful to him for it. So Masuda says how cruel it was for Michiko to be killed right after the war's end. Then says he must be making Ono sad with these reflections. So Ono says it is nice to remember her with Masuda because it brings him back, and that is, it brings him back to the old days. So the woman who answered the door comes in with the tea, and Masuda introduces her as Miss Suzuki. So he tells Ono that he tells Miss Suzuki that he and Ono were close colleagues, and tells Ono that Miss Suzuki is his nurse and housekeeper. So Ono has an urge to go look for Masuda's look at Masuda's garden, which he remembers as beautiful, but realizes that Masuda is too ill to accompany him and stays seated. So Masuda breaks the silence, saying he truly owes Miss Suzuki his life. So Masuda says he has been lucky not to have lost his savings and assets in the war, although he has lost his health. He says he would share with an old colleague indeed, especially since he has no heirs. Ono laughs and says this is not why he has come. Masuda tells the story of a colleague who of who is now reduced to begging from old friends. So Ono tells Masuda the reason he has come. That is, his daughter Noriko is in marriage talks, and someone may approach Masuda to ask about the family. So he asks Masuda if anyone approached him last year, and Masuda says no. He was very ill and wasn't seeing anyone, but he would only have had since that is nice things to say then, and only has nice things to say about Ono now. So Masuda tells Ono that he has already assured him that he will only say good things. Ono repeats how delicate the marriage talks may be. After a pause, Masuda sighs and says that he understands that there um, he understands that there are some people these days who would condemn what they had tried to do, but he believes that they have much to be proud of. So still he says he will exercise delicacy in his in discussing the past. So Matsuda asks who else Ono has visited. Ono tells him he is the first person he has come to see because he doesn't know where the rest of their old colleagues are. But Masuda says that If Ono is concerned about the past, he should probably seek out Kuroda. So remember, Kuroda was one of Ono's pupil. Even if it will be painful for them to meet again. So Ono says he has no idea where Kuroda is. So Masuda replies that he hopes the detective is equally unable to find him. So waiting for the tram, that is now later on when after the discussion with Masuda, as Ono waits for the tram from Arakawa after the visit, Ono is comforted that Masuda will speak positively about him. So he feels it was worthwhile to re-establish contact with his old colleagues. So that brings us to the end of the session. Indeed, it has been long, and I want to thank you for watching till the end. Keep it easy, Elimu, as always. Until next time, once again, I'm your teacher, Mr. Stanley Ombogo. Bye.